Okay. A special device for that. Okay. So I would like to revise my speech and pick up on the army issue, since you got a real serious issue. I believe and I think that the army in Israel is the worst violation of individual liberties exist in Israel, which is part of touching the issue of death, not only taxes. And I like first to address two historical facts that we should remember as Israelis, and maybe if you're not aware of, you should know about them as when addressing the issue. First of all, the worst ever war that Israel fought done with a volunteer army. This was the Independence War, when Israel was compiled of about 600,000 Jews, invaded by armies of Egypt, Jordan, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, gangs from all over the place, and Arab gangs to put on top of it. And the war started more than half a year before the Declaration of Independence. The conscription decree was initiated only after the declaring of the state, and it took effect only many months after that. You cannot actually do it immediately. So basically, the Israeli army became to be a conscription army by name only. It was a volunteer army that fought actually the worst and most difficult and dangerous war that took the highest toll ever. And volunteers were never I would say, deficiency in Israel.
1% of the population.
Yeah. Yeah, and the death toll was the highest ever. So this is one historical fact that we tend to remember, because we now cannot even imagine the idea of fighting a war with a volunteer army, which is not so long ago. The other fact that we should remember is that when Ben-Gurion signed the decree of establishing the IDF with a conscription, clause number 2 was that as long as there is an emergency situation, we will enact conscription. And the time is way past for considering ourselves in the same situation of the Independence War, but the idea of emergency situation is so useful that we use it anyway. So this is another issue that should be attacked when we consider the issue. Now, you suggest that this habit should be abolished altogether immediately. Actually, reality is basically stronger than what we trying to change in it. And we have to consider that Israel military compiled of about 120,000 soldiers. And the count of birth on 2014 was 140,000. I mean, and if you multiply it by 3 years and so on, you get army which is 3 times the size of the Israeli army. If you really have an all conscription army, which we don't use, we don't need, not really. So we're talking only on about 1/3 of the population some of the time, and the data showing us that it's less than 50% who are actually serving 36 months. Some of the population that goes into the army are getting shorter service, depend on their political pool. There is a group of soldiers that are associated with the kibbutzi movement, and they have what they call nachal, that's supposed to build, I would say, legions for building a new settlements and so on, and they have another route of helping in kibbutzim and settlements and stuff like that. There are what we call yeshivot esder. It's it's kind of yeshiva that combine studies and army, and this is a shorter period and so on. So basically, if you have no political pull and if you have no connection, and if you are just average Israeli, you have to pay the full price, while other either not paying at all or paying a much lower price. So it's all twist the full situation. It twisted the situation in Israel. Now the twisting going on and on, since everybody realized that we are treating unfairly our soldiers by putting them into this process. Every now and then comes some politician and say, okay, let's compensate the soldiers with giving them no VAT on buying the first apartment or something like that. Things that twisted the whole economy. So if you buy a 5-room apartment, you'll get more money. If you come from a poor family, you get a little bit of money when you need it so much. And of course, the Israeli government offer free school vouchers for released soldiers, but usually it goes to the colleges which are far away on the periphery. So if you want to build a career, academic career, and go to the best university, you immediately pushed aside to colleges that are less reputable. So we see more and more twisting of the economy in order to solve unsolvable problem. And we create the problem, we don't want to face it, we pose ourselves with some mythical concept of everybody serving the army, and this also causes us to create what we call a national service. So if you're not going to the army, because we realize we cannot conscript everybody, so do something else for the society, for the state. Basically the principle behind it is your life does not belong to you, you should serve. Service is the ultimate virtue, and in order to keep this kind of educational system that keep on working on young Israelis, we construct a strange system of service that actually put out of work the lowest wages worker in hospitals, at the police, people doing secretarial work, teacher that just beginning, all kind of stuff like that, that we send young people instead of the army to do this kind of services, and actually putting people who could be working out of jobs. And of course paying them and paying the students, so the young people who are doing it, not salary, but paying the overhead, which is quite a sum. And of course we are carrying with us a dynamic damage that goes all our life. I mean, when you go to pension, you have 3 years that you lost. You have 3 years that you didn't go into training, into university. And of course the public sector solve it very easily, because the public sector have the tendency of raise your rank before you go into pension. But you cannot do it on the private sector. So you will earn less all your life, and this is something which is much damaging than only the calculation of what happened on 1 year. And it's, you carry it all your life. So the toll is very high, and as Ayn Rand mentioned, this is the worst violation of individual rights that the state can put on you by actually demanding you to be hurt, to be killed, to sacrifice yourself without your consent. It's the most radical way of violating individual right. And just in an optimist note, I will mention in the last Knesset, Moshe Feiglin, at the time that used to be at the Likud, started the professional army caucus at the Knesset, and we helped to establish it. And it was the first time that a vote to abolishing the conscription army came to the floor of the Knesset. It was voted out 16 against 13, but it still was 64 against 13. But this is the start. It's something that never been heard of at the Israeli parliament. And we keep on pounding on this subject, and this is one of the items on our agenda at the Israeli Freedom Movement, and we'll keep working in order to change it. So thank you very much.
Yeah.